The house, the red house that we're going to talk about in a second. I would like to point out, I told you this is muddy, stinking swampland. Well, it's quite nice nowadays. We've landscaped it very, very nicely as well. But that's in no small part due to the fact that in 1910, the Charles River is such a disgusting mess of human waste and animal waste and nastiness that we eventually decided it would be a much better idea to dam it up. And so we do, right where the Museum of Science is now. If you've been down there, that's where the dam is. It was the Craigie Bridge up until that point. But that makes the Charles freshwater instead of brackish like it used to be. It also stops the Charles from expanding and contracting with the tides. So now the Charles stays in its rut, that's where it goes. In the old days, it breathed. It got bigger and smaller as the tides expanded. In a storm, it would actually splash right up against this retaining wall, as a matter of fact, was to keep the Charles out. This retaining wall, they say, dates from circa 1634. If that's true, and it seems to be, that is the oldest man-made structure in the entire city of Cambridge by about 25, 30 years. So, I thought I'd point that out to you. It's very nice sitting over Charlie's Beer Garden down here, but it's also retaining the wall for the Red House. Now, the Red House is a very, very important place. It's actually going to be built in 1802. It's built for a bunch of widows. It's actually the oldest surviving example of low-income housing in Cambridge. This is originally going to be built for the widow Hicks. Now, John Hicks, very interesting guy, as I mentioned. He's going to be one of two confirmed people from Cambridge at the Boston Tea Party. Now, that's no small voyage in those days. You got to go across the Great Bridge, which is now the JFK Bridge right here. You go over the mudflats, you go through Roxbury, you go through Brookline, you go up the Boston Neck, and you're eventually in Boston 10 miles later. It's a long journey. So for John Hicks, he's really got to feel passionately about something, make that journey, and then come all the way back in the same day. That's almost a 20-mile round trip, especially considering his wife and his kids are very on the fence about their politics. He's a staunch patriot. His two kids, he knows for a fact, are very, very Tory-oriented. They're very loyal to the crown. His wife, nobody really knows. She was on the fence, ambivalent. Whatever the case, he has to sneak out his back window, according to family legend, to get to the Boston Tea Party so he doesnst wake up his sons. He comes back home about 2 o'clock in the morning. His wife is waiting for him, again, according to family legend. Says, "Where have you been?" Says, "You know, I was just out for like a walk. I don't really know." Says, "Yeah, right. You've been gone for 16 hours. Where the hell were you? I can see that you were out by your boots." And she picks one up, and a tea leaf trickles down from it. And she goes, "Oh, I know what you were doing." Puts it down. Feels a great amount of relief because he was not off with some other woman like a mistress, right? So he feels some relief too, not having to lie to his wife. He goes upstairs. His sons are also awake apparently, and they of course say, "Dad, where were you?" And he says, "I was off with a mistress of mine." They say, "Oh, thank God, because you were at that awful tea party." Whatever the case, John Hicks, 2 years later, he's 50 years old in 1775 when the revolution officially begins. Paul Revere and William Dawes go sprinting down the Great Bridge. They go through the Cambridge Common. This is their path, right there where that car just went by. It's William Dawes' path. Paul Revere's going up through the Charlestown area. Point is, apparently John Hicks is a heavy enough sleeper that he does not wake up. He is not told that there is a war going on, so when he wakes up the next morning, he's told there were shots fired on the Green in Concord and Lexington. He freaks out, and he does what a lot of people around here do. They go, "Oh, the war has started, now's my chance to get my anger out on the British." Grabs his gun, goes running up to Watson's Corner with a couple of his buddies. It's Moses Richardson, Isaac Gardner, and John Hicks. I've always found it a little bit funny that Moses, Isaac, and John wander up to the north of Cambridge, hide behind some barrels and wait for these red coats to march by. When they do, 3 50-year-old men pop up and start shooting at them. There's 1,500 light infantry and dragoon soldiers in this column. It's not a smart move, of course. They're actually outflanked before they fire a shot, in all honesty. They're wiped clean as a slate. His 14-year-old son will be sent to find him, finds his dad, brings him back with a bullet through his heart, but a smile on his face. He died the way he wanted to. As a matter of fact, they will throw all 3 of these guys into a grave right then and there after they bring their bodies back from Menotomy at the time. There is dirt being piled on their faces, so his son says, "Hold on," jumps into the grave, lays a handkerchief across his father's face, and they continue to fill the grave. When they're looking for John Hicks's grave years and years and years later, they don't know which one it is, but when they dig up a body with a handkerchief across its face, they assume it must be him. And so the memorial to him is now upon a grave that at least had a handkerchief on its face. That's all we know about it. Anyway, I digress. His wife is quickly widowed and can't afford to do anything, so she has to move out of the John Hicks house, which is, believe it or not, around the corner here. She will move later on, another 25, 27 years later, into this house, low-income housing. with her daughter, who is also named Elizabeth Hicks, and is also a widow. So there are two widow Hickses living here at the time. When they leave in 1807, Susanna Cox will move in here. She is also a widow, so this seems to be a widow's house in general. Nowadays, because of Susanna Cox and the Hicks widows, they call this the Cox-Hicks house, and I think that's very appropriate, especially if you're a chiropractor. It's probably what it should be these days, but instead it's a lovely restaurant. If you'd like to come on our pub crawl, you'll hear all about it. In the meantime, we're going to keep moving.